Hello, welcome to the School Transportation Nation. I am your host, unsupervised Taylor Hannon, Associate Editor of School Transportation News. I've been left, Ryan and Tony are off sending the November issue to print, so it's all hands on deck, but it is a good issue, so I definitely encourage you guys to check it out. But I just want to give a big shout out to Transfinder, the leader in school bus routing software. They are our episode sponsor, so thank you to them. I would be amiss if I didn't mention a deadline coming up for y'all. STN Expo Reno early bird registration. It's ending on October 29th, so you guys have a few days left to save $100, so definitely get on that. Also, I'm going to throw in a bonus code because I am unsupervised and Ryan and Tony aren't here to tell me I can't. So I'm going to say you can save another $100 on top of that. Use promo code STN100 when you check out. So that's going to be a savings of $200 altogether. Make sure you register by October 29th and don't tell Ryan and Tony I gave you guys another $100 off, all right? Deal. And make sure you guys register at stnexpo.com. All right, I'll see you guys there in Reno. Jumping into the news for this week, vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds could be available early next month. So that's just a couple of weeks. The FDA is getting together on October 26th to potentially authorize the COVID-19 vaccine for younger children. And then the CDC is kind of following right after that, November 2nd through 3rd. So be on the lookout for that. And it's actually really interesting because I've been talking to a lot of transportation directors, school bus drivers, and I'm kind of wondering if, having students vaccinated, or at least knowing your students are vaccinated, is more comforting for the driver, right? So I've been talking to some people and I'm hoping to have a special report up on this. If it's not up by now, it should be up soon. So that's what I have to say about that. But one kind of statistic that came out of the trend survey, which is also in November, is 35% of people said, yes, they would feel more comfortable driving a route knowing all students are vaccinated, whereas the 65% said no. So it's super interesting. And I would be curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. If you're listening to this and you have an opinion on this, definitely email us. You can email me directly, taylor@stnonline.com. I'm writing this article, so if you want to talk and you want to share your perspectives, I would love to hear what you have to say. But that's kind of what we're looking at now. What is these younger vaccines being available, what does that do for student transportation? In other news, we just celebrated School Bus Safety Week last week, so that was great. I want to thank you guys all for emailing me. I had a lot of good conversations. A lot of great pictures came in, so there's an article up on that, or will be up shortly. We also will be using a lot of stuff for our social media, so there's still time. If you guys haven't sent anything, feel free to do so. You can use the same email that you heard, but yeah, looking for stuff like that for our social media and everything. But I want to hear from someone who celebrated it. So let's go ahead and jump over to Shannon Weber. She's the Director of Transportation at Florence Unified School District in Arizona. And she's going to tell us why School Bus Safety Week is important, how she celebrated her drivers. Let's get to the details. So I am here with Shannon Weber. She is the Director of Transportation for Florence Unified School District number 1 in Arizona. Hello, Shannon. How are you today?
Hi, I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, I figured, with School Bus Safety Week, last week, let's dive into it, see what you guys did as a district, and, why is it so important, especially right now, to recognize drivers? So we'll start with the first half of that question. What did you guys do? How did you celebrate?
Okay, yeah, perfect. We did a lot of little things. In the middle of the week, we had a staff meeting where we were able to, just have some bigger dialogue and conversations, and we had some vendors help us in support of a late breakfast, kind of a brunch type of a meal for drivers. But we did a couple things. We did something called walk-up trivia, where trainers and leadership were out in the yard and asking kind of impromptu questions of drivers. If it was a yes, they got a prize on the spot, whether that was a scratch or ticket or a little flashlight or, whatever it was, something small. We just want them to have safety at the front of their thoughts as they're doing this important work. And so sometimes I think it's easy for all of us to get a little complacent when we don't talk about it. I always tell my folks we have to practice how we play. So we had fun with danger zone questions, loading and unloading questions. If if you're not sure, ask kind of things. So that happened each morning and each afternoon during pre-trip. And then also through the week, training and leadership riding along on buses. Kind of if you see something, say something is what we called it, where they could, if, I don't know, an untied shoelace, like for me, right? Like it's easy to trip getting up and down. So you got to tell them, right? We have to just be in dialogue with our kids and our community. And why do I have you wait on the curb? So that when I'm approaching, so just talking to their students. And if we observed great things, then we gave, rewards. So it was good. It was good to have some fun and refresh and review. And Friday was the last day of the week. And we did a little bit bigger prizes and let staff ask safety questions of leadership. So we kind of reversed the roles. So it was fun.
I like that.
The burning desires. I always tell them if you walk in their shoes, it's much easier to earn respect if we're willing to, do what we ask them to do. So,
and I know the theme was be safe, know the danger zone. So do you guys kind of have instances of illegal passing or, do you do safety around the danger zone with student passengers?
Yeah, I think that everywhere in my years in this work, somebody passes the school bus because there's really not going to be, I feel like that's what they think. Well, a student won't be crossing when I'm driving, right? Which it's really scary. But so the 10-foot perimeter, the danger zone, we talk about it all the time. We send also this last week tips out to families on our social media platforms, one tip each day. What is the danger zone? Do they know? Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about why it is, and what can happen. And so it's, the 10-foot perimeter. And then we have a reminder that we send home to our special needs bus riders that has just some tips and tricks for waiting for the bus. And on the other side of that card is the danger zone, and it shows 10 feet, and it's like a visual picture of what it is and why it is. So outside of last week, it's definitely something we talk about a lot.
Good. And even with the students, I think it's important for them just that little reminder, hey, I'm going to look both ways before I cross, just to make sure.
Right. Wait for my cue.
There we go.
You have to wait for my cue because I'm making sure no one's coming. Did you know I can't see you when you think it's funny to beat on the back of my bus? Right? They think it's funny. They're, you know what I mean? If we don't educate them, then we can't hold them accountable. But for the most part, I think that I always say kids don't care what we know until they know that we care. And so if we're having dialogue with them and if we're building relationships, when it's serious, it's serious. So we try to, balance it a little bit.
Yeah. So kind of looking generally, what is the importance of this week for your drivers? Maybe it's that boosting morale, especially during this time right now where I feel like there's driver shortages, there's still COVID-19. What is that importance?
It really is. Well, I just think we have to place value on people, and I think we have to place value on FaceTime. So especially when you mentioned COVID-19, it's easy to get comfortable with that virtual platform, and it saves a little time and, whatever it does. But being out there on the ground, the hands and feet with them, right? Walking the yard, observing the pre-trip, riding along, it just reminds them how important their work is. I know we don't have a lot of time today, but there's a poem that I have that's called I'm Just the Bus Driver. And it's really specific to, I think, all the things that they do that people don't realize. And so pay is low. Communities around us, states around us, however their funding works, have had the opportunity to raise it either higher than or quicker than we have. And so really talking about how do those dollars, why isn't it us, right? It has nothing to do with the people, but more the process. So to remind them that we're advocating for an increase because it is difficult work and because the MAP 21 compliance that's coming at a federal level, at least here in Arizona, is going to require even more of them. So yeah, we like to celebrate anytime we can here just because we do this work because we love it, right? We don't get rich from it. It's not easy. And so I always tell people we either love it or hate it pretty quickly. So really important. Morale for sure and value on people and giving them the tools they need to do it well. Sometimes we can't impact the money, but we can give them the resources.
That's great. I wish you could bottle up that feeling, and give that to other people so that they can become school bus drivers too. That feeling of love and feeling a purpose for what they do.
It really is. And it really is. I think you have to be You have some drivers who it seems like it's really easy for, and they don't have to do anything, and their kids listen and manage and whatever. And some who really struggle. But, in my career, you have to cheerlead them over that first hump. And then I feel like it's like once they have the victory, whatever it is with the bus management, that's usually the hardest part, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can learn the mirrors and the roadway rules and laws and, the driving components and all that's hard enough. But now 50 kids behind me or more sometimes, all with different personalities, all with different things happening at home, and just really navigating through that. We have to teach that part. So in the training process, I think that's the part that we often leave out. Now that I know how to do this, how do I do it with kids?
Yeah. Wow. That's a really great point.
Yeah. So we try to make that like section 3, right? You're certified now. You've got your credentials. Now let's practice it with kids mm-hmm. because it's not. I mean, it takes time to figure out what works.
Mm-hmm. And patience.
Yeah. And we make them enforce seating charts. And like you had mentioned, sanitation now. So there's just one more thing all the time. Mm-hmm. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Shannon. I appreciate you jumping on and speaking with us. And, School Bus Safety Week is so important. And so I hope that last week really put into perspective, how important school bus drivers are to communities.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know here we tried to do a really good job of making sure they felt value and making sure our community knew, about the danger zone and about maybe some aha moments of what they didn't realize, our folks do every day. So I appreciate you having me. It's work that I love and it was a really fun week.
Thanks, Shannon. That was great. Super important. This is definitely the time to celebrate drivers and to really, teach the danger zone. Our next guest, Randy Gerald from Rotterdam-Mohonasen Central Schools in New York, he knows how serious the driver shortage is, but technology can help. Here's a solution: Transfinder's intuitive and award-winning RouteFinder Plus routing software. It helps you find efficiencies, consolidate routes, and eliminate the number of drivers you need without any negative impact. That's because RouteFinder Plus uses artificial intelligence optimization. Combined with your staff's institutional knowledge, routes can be redrawn to have minimal impact on your community. Let Transfinder support you in your search for drivers. 4 drivers shared why they love their jobs on a recent webinar. It's a great resource to pass along to anyone curious about what's involved in driving a school bus. To learn more or get the webinar to share, email getplus@transfinder.com and write driver in the subject line. Or call 800-373-3609. Now let's bring on Randy to hear more about the driver shortage in New York. All right, I am back with Randy Jerreld. He is the Transportation Director for Rotterdam-Mohonasen Central Schools in New York. Hello, Randy. How are you today?
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Everything's good here. It's still warm out. We haven't hit winter yet.
Oh, good. I was going to ask, what does it get to in New York over there?
For heat, it can get into the 90s sometimes, not this time of year, but in the summer. Right now, we've been kind of lucky. We've been hitting days in the 70s, which is a little unusually warm, but I'm hearing it's supposed to drop off to more seasonal temperatures, days in the 50s. The leaves are falling here and or turning, depending on where you are. And it's kind of the time of year everybody likes around here where it gets a little cooler, the leaves are turning. And so it's that nice time of year. People pay thousands of dollars to come here and peep our leaves, as they say.
I get it. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of background on your guys' operations. How's the school year going for you? I know you said you're 3 hours outside of New York City, so kind of a little bit more of the urban-suburban school district?
Yeah, we were right on the border of the city of Schenectady, which is a small city. So part of our district is a little more urban. A lot of our district is suburban, the housing developments and, all the corner stops and such. And we have one little section that's a little more rural that actually runs moving toward the city of Albany, but they call it the Pine Bush area, and it's a little more rural where we have kind of more house-to-house kind of stops. So we have a little blend of everything in our district, but we don't have a high amount of acreage or so to speak, square miles like some districts do. But some of our districts have, literally a couple of hundred square miles that they cover. So it kind of varies around here, a little different than the big city vibe 3 hours away.
Mm-hmm. And so how's your new school year going? I know we kind of talked earlier and you said you had a little bit of a rocky start, with the school bus driver shortage, what's kind of going on?
Yeah. I literally thought that I was going to be what we call flush. Like I had drivers for every run, a couple of subs. Felt like we were going into the school year in pretty good shape, and then just one thing happened after another. We lost several people, and now we're in a shortage where we're short runs, and every day starting we only have a couple of subs, and even our mechanics. We had a mechanic just retire a couple of weeks ago, so we're down in there in the garage as well. So it's kind of been tough. We have kept our heads barely above water all year, which is better than a lot of our neighboring districts have done. But I feel like, we're kind of in that barrel heading for Niagara Falls, so to speak, and we're getting closer every day. So definitely worrisome, definitely difficult. I mean, COVID, the Delta variant is very much alive and well in our district. We've had a lot of cases even this week. And that has been challenging as well in terms of we have some staff that are out. There's students that are out, people in quarantine. It's been it adds a lot to our already delicate predicament with the shortage of drivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that's not easy. And I've been hearing that too. It's like, okay, we're at a shortage of drivers and all of a sudden a driver gets sick and you're not prepared for that, or a driver gets a cold or something. And then now you're even more short, right?
Well, yeah, tomorrow I will use that as an example. We're one call out away from being what I call underwater, which means that there's more runs to cover than we've got bodies to put on buses. And then we've got to, try to be somewhat creative, and there's going to probably be some disruption of service and those kinds of things that, the things that parents really don't want to hear you say. So it's been tough. I think our biggest problem this year, and again, it was something I thought I had figured out. What you think you have done in August sometimes isn't what happens in September and October, but we had a contractor doing our sporting events. Well, they're short of people too, and it turned out they weren't really able to do it for us anymore. So we were really left in a predicament because we just literally have no drivers to get sports teams out that all want to go out right at the dismissal time because they play at 4:00, but that 2:00, 3:00 hours when we're taking all the kids home. So really tough to do that. So we've been kind of being creative with that. We've been doing a combination of either busing or having coaches drive Suburbans, which, it has worked out okay. Not something we really love. Having parents drive kids to the games just to get them there, and even chartering motor coaches. But they don't have a lot of availability either. So we take what we can get there. So we've been doing all sorts of different things to try to get our teams out and so the kids can play. I mean, they lost last year, which was bad enough, and it's certainly not something we want to do to tell them this year they're not going to be able to have sports either. So, so we've been trying to find really creative ways, even though we really just don't have bodies to get them out.
Yeah, we've definitely been hearing that athletic trips are kind of causing problems in school districts, and with the driver shortage going on, it's definitely hard to fill all those as well.
Well, yeah, even like every year they're kind of a stressor. They stress the system, but this year they've been the backbreaker to the system. There's just no way to do it. And like I said, and I think most people are being pretty good about it. Parents have stepped up to help drive. Coaches are driving Suburbans to, anything to get the teams there. The smaller teams are usually going that way. The bigger teams, we try to get them a coach if we can. And, it gets tougher and tougher as the season goes on because now they're getting to the point where they're getting into their championships, and some of them go out in the morning, which is just as bad because they go out right during the time when we're taking kids to school. So that makes it even more difficult. Well, same difficulty, but again, we got to try to find some way to get them there. So it's definitely strained my creative juices this year, and it's obviously been a stressor for everybody else too. I mean, it's, we're we're a topic at the board meetings now. I've never been a topic at the board meetings in my almost 14 years here. Maybe once in a while, but not like we have been. We've been kind of front and center. Not the place you want to be, but.
Well, hey, that's a great segue because you guys have also been front and center now in Senator Governor eyes, right? There's a lot of news coming out of New York recently about how to help with this driver shortage. I think we can kind of start with Governor Hochul. She kind of announced some long-term steps, it kind of seemed like, to help remove barriers for the commercial driver's license. And then she also launched an outreach, right, to more than 550,000 CDL holders. So were you guys able to get any applicants through that outreach?
It was, again, a lot of people are board members, the governor, and a lot of well-meaning stuff because I know they want to help with the situation. We got a list of about 290 people that lived in the Capital District region, our region, who replied that they were interested in school bus driving from this survey that went out. I mean, I got one. Every CDL holder in New York State got one, which I thought was kind of humorous, asking me if I wanted to drive school bus. I said, not really, but sometimes I have to. But yeah, so they sent that out, and we kind of immediately shot a bulk email out to all of them with our promotional video and the whole thing, just trying to say, trying to promote our district. I know some other districts did the same. But in looking at the list, in the replies we got from the list, they either would reply back, too far for me to commute. And those were probably some of the more positive ones. We got some really negative ones, which I'm wondering why they wrote that they were interested in school bus driving so that we would send to them, because they, were like, I'm not going to submit, because we have, in New York State, we also have, everybody has to be either vaccinated fully or they have to submit to weekly testing. And they would send back things like, I'm not going to submit to forced vaccinations and weekly testing and things like that. It's like, so we would get some negative stuff like that. We had a few people, I think we had like 3 people respond that they might be available certain times of the week. But in terms of that, we haven't heard anything. We kind of followed up with them with some calls and stuff. But again, we didn't really hear anything from their follow through. So, and I know we looked at the list, and some of them were people that other districts had let go. And so the people with, that maybe you don't want. So it was a good idea, and maybe some other districts, struck some gold with that, but we did not. So,
okay. Well, it's the thought that counts, right? It's these creative ideas that are being taken.
It's certainly worth trying. I mean, it was worth a shot to try to get some people, but sometimes I know we've had these in the past before the pandemic. We're talking about having another one actually. We have a thing where people can go and test a school bus. They can kind of drive it around campus just to get a feel for it, because so many people are intimidated by the size of the bus, and just to kind of show it's really not that bad. And in some ways, it's better than driving a car. You've got better, sight lines and views than you would in your own car. And they're pretty easy to drive. Everything's automatic transmission, power steering, yada, yada. We had one. We even had the news people come one day to a live remote in the morning. They were interviewing us, and we had people show up to that. But as it turned out, we really didn't get any hires out of that. So, we have one that was kind of close. She ended up aiding for us for a little while, but she never really pursued the driver training, and then she left. So, it's hard. It's hard to find. I actually do have a couple of people in training right now. I have one who's near getting their road test done, a second one who is into the training process right now, and then one is trying to get their permit, which is also a barrier for new people to get a permit. There's a lot of, and this kind of falls back to another one of the governor's things. There's a lot of technical knowledge that goes into being a school bus driver to pass these CDL tests that they're really never going to use as a school bus driver, such as knowing all the brake component parts. They're not going to be mechanics. The tests are kind of designed for over-the-road truckers who really do need to do repairs out on the road and need to know their vehicle really well. And that's not to say that school bus drivers shouldn't know anything about their vehicle. They should, but they don't necessarily need the kind of depth because school bus driving is, short range. They're out of their garage and 2 hours later they're back to the garage. So anything that happens on the road, we hopefully have mechanics here if they're not driving to go out there and rescue them. And certainly they're not going to spend any great length of time before they get rescued.
And that's been a big push too, right? For that CDL school bus specific license.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea if they could do that. I know that our chapter, we're part of NIAP, New York Association for Pupil Transportation, and I'm in the Capital Region chapter. And I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to get our legislators in New York to give a tax credit. They give a tax credit to volunteer firemen and such, and veterans, and to add that to school bus drivers, that they would get a tax credit for doing it, which is another incentive to bring them on. But I think definitely the CDL with a school bus only endorsement would be a great idea, because they really don't need all this extra stuff. We go through all sorts of struggles with med cert, but our drivers don't drive interstate, so they don't really need all that. There's a lot of stuff that's there that's federal that probably could melt away and would help, especially with the barriers of, the general test. They, even for a school bus driver, the typical lady that's, either been in the business field or some other field, and they want to drive school bus in their retirement or whatever. And they go in for these tests that are all technical about the engine and the brakes and all that. They don't really need to know what an S-cam is. They just need to know generally how the air brake system works and, what to do if it doesn't, how to test to make sure that it does. They do need to know that, but they don't need to know all the parts and have them memorized. So, or they don't need to know how doubles and tankers and hazmat trucks, operate and what they have to do.
And I know we talk a lot about this in the November issue too, about, a lot of people on our Facebook page just kind of said, oh, but a school bus only CDL will take away the safety element. And I think kind of to your point, it's not taking away the safety element. It's just not focusing so much attention on some of these other things that aren't necessarily school bus specific.
And those are the biggest barriers to people doing it. And a lot of people walk away when they see how difficult it is. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I mean, again, they would still have to know their bus. They would still have to be able to operate their bus in the safest possible manner. But they don't need all that extra stuff about, mechanical stuff and knowing, what all the parts are in the bus.
Right.
They should know some parts. They should know when something's going wrong. They need to, let somebody know.
So jump in ship a little bit. Another senator in New York is kind of making a big push too on the DOE to release guidance on the ESSER funds. I told you there's a lot of stuff coming out in New York, guys. But have you guys looked at using federal funds? Are you using them for school bus drivers? What does that kind of look like?
We have the federal funds, and they actually, the superintendent in a meeting said to me, yeah, we could start using these funds. If we need to pay more we have used probably are using some of it to help contract out runs, because I've been contracting some runs out to contractors, and I've even just done it recently to just try to, I keep squeezing the sponge, trying to get every drip out of it I can. And, I'm running out of drops at this point, but that's part of that. And we're using some of the money for that. We're looking at a couple of extra positions here to try to, make it better for some drivers that really need extra hours. And maybe that's, a detraction, so they don't go out and get a full-time job and leave. So we're looking at those kinds of things. And we're also looking at incentives and sign-on bonuses. And there's all this stuff is under discussion. We haven't really acted on a lot of that yet. I mean, other districts around us are doing some of those things. I don't know that it's making people line up at their door, but I would say that everything helps. I would have to say there is at some point, and I don't know, to be honest, I don't know what that point is, that there's got to be a tipping point where Because one of the comments we've gotten back from prospective drivers who don't want to do it is that the responsibilities are not commensurate with the pay.
Right. And we hear that a lot too.
And I don't disagree with that. I think there's a lot of responsibilities. I mean, I was out to lunch with my son who was visiting from college one day, and we went into the local Moe's and saw that they had help wanted in, $18, $19 an hour. I said, well, that's about what I'm paying people to start as a bus driver. Here they are driving a school bus with the immense responsibility of all of these young children behind them. And yet, if I drop the salsa, I'm picking up the burrito, and it's not such a big deal. But if I do something to that school bus, some children could get hurt or worse, and that's a big deal.
Right.
And
so many restaurants are hiring now, so it's hard, right? It's hard to compete.
Well, and I think not only that, we just talked about the whole training process. I mean, it takes a couple of months at least to get a driver ready. Well, they go down that Moe's and they can be working, in a couple of days. Boom, you're hired. When can you start?
Right.
So I can't say when can you start. I say, when can you start training? When can you get that CDL permit? Because then we really can't do a whole lot with you until that happens. So it's it's not promotional for me, when there's a lot of other jobs out there. So it's tough. And we're part-time, which is another problem, where we don't give the hours that, I don't know, maybe not all of these other places are given full-time hours either, but, we're basically a 4.5 hour a day operation. So there are some runs that are longer, but you have to have seniority to get those. So that takes a little time to get. So we're kind of at that disadvantage too.
Well, Randy, I appreciate you jumping on and sharing with us a little bit what's happening at your district. And I hope that, there is more outreach and school transportation does get more notice. I think it's cool that you're at the head of conversations in your boardroom. Maybe not something that you want, but maybe this is the push now to really get school transportation noticed and realized as a vital part of education.
Yeah, it is. It's a very important part. And I think a lot of people are realizing that they're appreciating their school bus driver much more than they ever have maybe in the past because, they're somewhat of an endangered species. I mean, the other piece is my staff currently, they're not younger people. These are older people. So it's even scarier when you think about we don't have many people coming in the door. But there's going to be a number of people going out the door because, people don't work forever. And that's where we've kind of been gradually shrinking over the last 5 years is the fact that our older drivers are retiring and leaving and there's just not enough replacing it. So it just our roster gets smaller and smaller.
Well, I hope you find some fresh applicants soon and you guys are back to rolling with no school bus driver shortages. That's the dream right there, right?
That would be the dream.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for jumping on and speaking with us.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a good night out there in California.
Hey, thanks to Randy and Shannon for joining me on this episode. We appreciate our sponsor, Transfinder. Couldn't do it without you guys. Definitely check out stnonline.com for latest news headlines on the school bus industry. We are covering it all, so check it out. Learn more and register now for the TSD conference at tsdconference.com and for STN Expo Reno at stnexpo.com. Don't forget, October 29th is the deadline for that savings. Subscribe, stream, review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, stnpodcast.com, or wherever you guys listen. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.